The sky was alive with ghosts. Silver streaks of jet trails cut through the tropical haze, twisting above jungles that burned below. It was not quiet up there, never quiet. Each cloud could hide a hunter, each blip on a radar screen could mean life or death. The Vietnam War had turned the air itself into a battlefield. By the mid-1960s, American bombers filled the skies in endless waves, pounding bridges, roads and factories across North Vietnam. Operation Rolling Thunder had begun, and with it came a storm of steel and fire. The US believed their advanced technology, radar, guided missiles, supersonic jets, would crush an enemy still rebuilding from war. But the North Vietnamese had something that could not be measured on a radar screen. They had patience, discipline. And soon they had the MiG-21. The MiG was small, fast and deadly. It climbed like a bullet and struck like a knife. Against the heavy F-4 Phantoms and F-105 Thunderchiefs, it seemed almost fragile, until it attacked. Soviet advisors had trained a new generation of Vietnamese pilots in the art of ambush. Hide below radar. Wait for the perfect angle. Strike once. Disappear. The Americans called it hit and run. The Vietnamese called it survival. From the ground, villagers looked up and saw white dots spiralling in the blue. A second later, those dots turned into fire. Parachutes drifted down like flowers, followed by black smoke that marked another fallen machine. The roar of jet engines mixed with the echo of anti-aircraft guns. To the pilots above, the world shrank to a few square miles of sky, a place where death came faster than thought. North Vietnam's air defence network grew tighter each month. Radar stations guided MiGs toward intruders, while missile batteries guarded the skies over Hanoi and Haiphong. The Americans adapted, flying in complex formations, jamming radars and sending decoy flights. Yet every now and then, a single blip vanished, erased by a flash of cannon fire or a missile that found its mark. Inside this chaos, legends began to form. Men whose names carried through radio chatter and whispers. Pilots who painted stars on the sides of their MiGs for every enemy destroyed. They were the new knights of the air. Their duels fought at speeds where a single mistake meant vapour. Among them was a young pilot who said little, but flew with terrifying precision. He studied his enemies, learnt their patterns, and struck with perfect timing. His name was Nguyen Van Coc. Before long, his call sign would become a quiet warning among American crews. There's a MiG up there, and it knows exactly what it's doing. In a war defined by noise and fire, Coc would become a phantom. A pilot shaped by the storm, born in a sky where men vanished as fast as they appeared. And soon his name would rise through that storm, carried by the smoke of 9 burning aircraft. The year was 1961, and the smell of jet fuel hung over a cracked runway north of Hanoi. A young man stood there in a faded flight suit, the sun glinting off the cockpit of an old training jet. His name was Nguyen Van Coc, and he was about to trade the rice fields of his childhood for the cold, thin air of the stratosphere. He had grown up in a world already on fire. His father, a soldier, was killed during the First Indochina War. His mother, left alone, taught him discipline, silence, and purpose. The war had taken everything from him except a single belief, that the sky could be his battlefield. When North Vietnam began recruiting for its first class of fighter pilots, Coc volunteered without hesitation. He was quiet, almost stoic, but his instructors quickly noticed something different about him. He never panicked, he never showed fear. In 1962, he was sent to the Soviet Union. The journey was long, the training brutal. Soviet instructors barked orders through translators, teaching young Vietnamese recruits the secrets of aerial combat in freezing classrooms, filled with the smell of kerosene and chalk. They studied flight physics by day and practiced dogfights in primitive simulators by night. For Coc, it was a test of endurance, not just of the body, but of the mind. He learnt the anatomy of the MiG family like a surgeon studies nerves. The MiG-17 came first, heavy, stubborn, unforgiving. It taught him patience. Then came the MiG-21, sleek and deadly, a silver spear that could climb almost straight up. It demanded perfection. Its controls were sharp, its limits narrow. One wrong touch and it would spin out of control. Coc thrived on that precision. He learned to merge instinct with calculation, to feel the machine as if it were part of his own body. At night, he would stand on the edge of the airfield, watching other jets slice through the twilight. He memorised every takeoff, every landing, the rhythm of it all. There was no romance in his ambition, only focus. War had already taken the idea of glory from him. What remained was duty. By the time he returned to Vietnam, the air war had changed. American F-4 Phantoms now ruled the sky, thundering over the Red River Delta. Coc's squadron was tasked with defending Hanoi, the heart of the North. He was just 22 years old, barely older than the mechanics who refueled his jet. But when he climbed into the cockpit, his hands moved with the confidence of a veteran. Each time the alarm siren screamed, he sprinted to his MiG, strapped in, and felt the roar of the Tumansky engine rise behind him. The world outside blurred into a silver rush of speed. The ground vanished. The sky opened like a battlefield without borders. Nguyen Van Coc was no longer a student. He was now a weapon, forged by loss, sharpened by training, and aimed straight at the storm that was coming. The morning sky was clear, but Coc could feel the hunt long before he saw it. His radio hissed with coded chatter from ground control, each word a nerve of the vast defence network below. Somewhere to the east, American jets were crossing the Gulf of Tonkin, sleek, powerful and confident. Coc adjusted his oxygen mask, his hand steady on the throttle. The MiG-21 beneath him purred like a predator waiting for permission to strike. By now, he had learnt the rhythm of American attacks. They came in waves, always loud, always heavy with bombs. The Phantoms flew fast and high, believing their radar and missiles would protect them. Coc and his comrades learned to turn that confidence against them. The tactic was simple: vanish, ambush, disappear. Ground radar would guide them into position, sometimes just above the mountains, sometimes hiding behind storm clouds. Then, with a sharp call from command, they would climb, a vertical strike straight into the heart of the formation. One pass, one missile, then a hard dive back to the safety of low altitude before the escorts could react. The Americans called these sudden attacks pop-up strikes. Pilots barely had time to shout "Mid-G" before the sky lit up. To Coc, it was like threading a needle through thunder. Every move had to be perfect. One mistake, and he'd be the fireball tumbling toward the jungle below. His first kill came not in triumph, but in silence. A Phantom locked in on his wingman, its exhaust glowing in the haze. Coc climbed, turned hard, and fired an ATOL missile from less than 2 kilometres away. The missile struck the Phantom's tail. A flash of orange. 2 parachutes. No words over the radio. Just breathing. His own, steady and measured. From then on, Coc's reputation began to spread through the 921st Fighter Regiment. He didn't speak much after missions. He didn't celebrate. But his eyes told the story. Sharp, focused, always watching the horizon. Others began to time their manoeuvres off his. When Coc moved, they followed. He studied American tactics relentlessly. The Phantoms often flew with radar jammers and missile pods, trying to overwhelm MiGs with technology. Coc countered with patience. He learned to strike from blind spots, to attack when their fuel was low, to wait until they turned home, when they were tired, distracted and most vulnerable. Every engagement taught him something new. He learned how the sun could be used as a shield, how a dive into the clouds could break a lock, how to vanish in a sky filled with contrails. War was now an art of seconds and angles, and he painted it with precision. For Coc, there was no thrill in the hunt, only the quiet satisfaction of survival. Each victory meant another day in the air, another mission completed, another reminder that the enemy, no matter how advanced, could still bleed. As the months passed, the Americans began to whisper about a MiG pilot who seemed to appear out of nowhere, a ghost in the sky. His ambushes were perfect, his escapes cleaner than luck should allow. That ghost had a name, Nguyen Van Coc, and his legend was only beginning to take shape. The horizon burned gold as the sun rose over the Red River Delta. Coc's MiG-21 shimmered in that light, like a blade drawn from its sheath. He had already flown dozens of missions by then, quick, surgical strikes that left enemy pilots wondering who had hit them. But in 1967, something changed. The air war had turned into a duel of aces, and Coc was about to etch his name into the sky forever. His second victory came during a bombing run near Hanoi. F-105 Thunderchiefs were diving through the clouds, their bellies glowing from the heat of their own ordnance. Coc and his wingman climbed fast from below the radar line. He locked onto the last jet in the formation and fired. The missile streaked forward, silent at first, then screaming. The Thunderchief exploded mid-dive, fragments raining over the jungle. Coc didn't cheer. He simply turned away and disappeared into the haze. Each mission became faster, deadlier, and more precise. Coc began keeping a small notebook, a few pages of rough sketches and coded notes. Targets, altitudes, angles. He treated every dogfight like a lesson. Where others relied on instinct, Coc built patterns. He knew how American pilots liked to break left under missile fire. He knew when they hesitated, how they climbed to find cloud cover. He turned their habits into traps. His third and fourth kills came weeks apart, both phantoms. The first was lured into a steep climb where the MiG's lighter frame gave Coc the edge. The second fell after a classic head-on pass, a manoeuvre so risky that few pilots even attempted it. Coc never flinched. The Americans began to change their tactics. They flew with tighter formations, launched decoy flights, and even sent specially equipped phantoms to hunt MiGs. Still, Coc adapted. He grew quieter, more deliberate, as if his mind had detached from the chaos around him. His instructors called it perfect focus. To Coc, it was survival through simplicity. By the time he reached his sixth kill, the 921st Regiment had started calling him the Silent Hawk. His superiors promoted him to flight leader, a role that demanded not only precision but control. His calm was contagious. Even under missile lock warnings, his voice over the radio stayed level. Turn left, climb, fire. No wasted words. His 7th and 8th victories came during the heaviest bombing raids of the war. Koski attacked from above the clouds, using the MiG's speed to strike before American radar could react. Each time, the result was the same. A flash in the sky, a falling parachute, and silence. His 9th and final confirmed kill came in 1968. 2 Phantoms were flying cover for bombers near Yen Bai. Coc waited in the shadows of a storm front. When they passed beneath him, he dove like lightning. The first missile missed. The second hit. The Phantom burst apart, its wreckage scattering across the rice fields below. 9 victories. 9 men sent spinning into history. Back at base, ground crews painted small red stars beneath the cockpit of Coc's MiG-21. Each one marked a victory, but Coc never looked at them for long. He knew what they meant. Not pride, but survival. Every star was another mission he had returned from. Another reminder that someday one might be painted for him. But that day never came. Because after his 9th kill, something strange happened. Nguyen Van Coc stopped flying combat missions, and no one could say exactly why. It happened quietly, almost without notice. One week, Coc was leading sorties over the northern border. The next, his name vanished from the mission board. No announcement, no ceremony, just silence. The mechanic still polished his MiG-21, its red stars gleaming in the sun, but its cockpit stayed empty. At first, his squadron assumed it was exhaustion. The air war had pushed every pilot to the edge, flying multiple missions in a single day. Some said Coc had been injured. Others whispered that he was being rewarded, pulled from danger before luck could turn against him. Whatever the truth, no one spoke of it openly. In North Vietnam, questions about heroes could sound like disloyalty. Official reports claimed Coc had been reassigned to special duties. That could mean anything: ground command, technical instruction, or even state propaganda. But then, months later, a Soviet advisor mentioned seeing him at a flight academy near Hanoi. The rumour spread through the airbases like static. Coc, the ghost of the skies, was now training new pilots. It made sense on paper. He was the country's top ace, a living example of precision and control. His knowledge of American tactics was unmatched. Every manoeuvre, every pattern, every flaw in the enemy's formations, Coc had memorised them all. If he could pass that on, he could multiply his own effectiveness 100-fold. And yet, the pilots who knew him best said something felt off. He had always lived for the air, for that quiet moment when the jet climbed above the noise of war. To take him out of the cockpit was like asking a bird to walk. Some believed he had resisted, that the reassignment was not a request but an order. Behind the official praise and medals there was unease. North Vietnam had lost several of its top aces to the same fate. After achieving fame, they vanished from combat, often to serve in training or propaganda roles. It was a pattern, one that protected valuable pilots, but also kept them away from the public eye. A hero alive was useful. A hero shot down was a liability. For Coc, it meant the end of his war. He spent his days in classrooms and on airfields, guiding younger pilots through drills, teaching them how to think like hunters instead of targets. His lessons were clinical, almost surgical. Never chase, never waste motion. Wait until you are certain, then strike once. But inside, something had changed. Those who met him later described him as polite, distant, always composed, but somehow elsewhere. The man who once ruled the sky now stood at its edge, watching others take flight. Years later, when the war ended, Nguyen Van Coc's record still stood. 9 confirmed kills, no losses. But his disappearance from combat left a shadow longer than his victories. He had entered the war as a ghost and left it the same way, unseen, silent, and untouchable. Somewhere between the roar of his last mission and the stillness of the training fields, North Vietnam's greatest ace had vanished into history. The war ended, but Coc's story didn't. It simply drifted into silence, the way contrails fade into the blue. His name remained in reports and in hushed conversations between pilots, but no one seemed to know where he went. To the Americans, he became a line in declassified intelligence. Nguyen Van Coc, MiG-21 pilot, 9 confirmed kills. To his countrymen, he was something else entirely, a legend that had walked out of the sky and never returned. By the 1970s, Vietnam had changed. The bombing stopped, the guns went quiet, and the pilots who survived were turned into symbols of endurance. Statues were built for generals and commanders, but the men who fought in the air rarely sought attention. Coc was among them, quiet, humble, content to disappear into the machine of rebuilding. He continued working as an instructor for a time, teaching at the Air Force Academy outside Hanoi. There he trained young pilots who had grown up listening to stories about him. They said he moved like an old hawk, calm, patient, precise. He taught not with speeches but with stillness. When he spoke, his words were clipped, deliberate, each one carrying the weight of experience. "Don't chase," he told them. "Wait until you can't miss." Those who trained under him described an intensity that never left his eyes. It was as if he could still see the war playing out somewhere beyond the clouds. The students said that when a jet roared overhead, he always looked up first, not out of fear, but habit. Then, sometime in the 1980s, he retired quietly. No parade, no final flight, just a file stamped completed service. After that, he slipped from public record. Some claimed he lived near Hanoi. Others believed he travelled as a consultant for Vietnam's developing air force. No one really knew, but his influence remained everywhere. In the manuals used by pilots, in the flight tactics still studied today. His ambush style, his precision timing, his ability to make a kill in a single pass, all became part of Vietnam's air doctrine. Generations of pilots learnt not just how to fly, but how to think like Nguyen Van Coc. Even abroad, his name carried a strange respect. American veterans who once hunted MiGs admitted in interviews that Coc was one of the most skilled adversaries they faced. To them, he was a phantom of discipline, invisible until it was too late. And that may have been the point. Coc had survived where so many did not because of luck, but because of restraint. He flew when ordered, attacked only when sure, and disappeared before the sky could claim him. Today, his MiG-21 rests in a museum in Hanoi. Its red stars gleam under glass, faded but unforgotten. Visitors walk past, reading his name without realising the quiet power behind it. Nguyen Van Coc never sought fame. He sought mastery. And in doing so, he became something rarer than a hero. He became a ghost that history could not erase. The last of the true sky hunters, the ace who vanished and never needed to return. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, leave a comment below. I always read what you think. Hit like if you learned something new, and subscribe so you don't miss the next untold story of war, courage and survival. Turn on the bell for more history brought to life. See you in the next one.